Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the January 2020. It's a new decade, a new year. Welcome to the January 2020 edition of Streaming Media Advanced Forum, or SMAF for short. And as always, you're with Don Robinson, myself, one of the numerous hosts who will guide you through the next hour of slightly random and amusing, but nonetheless informative conversations all about the streaming technology industry. I should hopefully be joined in the virtual studio by my erstwhile colleague, Tim Siglin. Tim, are you out there?
I am out here, Dom. Can you hear me and see me?
I can indeed. You've got a great picture this time round. Just checking in.
And apparently we're sponsored by National Geographic here.
Of course.
My map is, everyone knows, normally I sit slightly forward, but I rearrange the dining room to get my Christmas tree, which is now officially a Christmas tree, out of the dining room. And it turns out now my over-the-shoulder shot is the bottom of the giant map that I have on the dining room wall. Perfect. So how was your Boxing Day?
Boxing Day? Do you do Boxing Day in the States?
No, I'm just trying to be culturally relevant when I ask you a question.
Yeah, Boxing Day being great celebration.
He's just trying to make you feel comfortable, then.
It's the Boxing Day is the celebrated day for the cat, isn't it? Because cats love boxes, so it's the most looked forward to day in the year for our cats. We left loads of boxes out. The cats sat in them, and then did what cats do and puked all over them. So we've put them outside. But yeah, Christmas is great. How was yours, Tim?
Actually, quite well. I got. I will have to find it because I'm really bad. I got the geekiest gift of all this year. It's one of the old Casio calculator watches, and it turns out they're less expensive now than they were when they first came out when I was 14 years old in 1984. The funny thing is I can't stand watches, so I wore it for about 2 days, and now I take it off and put it on occasionally just to feel like, I don't know, like I'm Back to the Future or something like that.
So, you need to,
like Santa finally answered your letter?
Yeah. From 84.
That's why you do it, right? Yeah, exactly.
Well,
from 84.
Apparently I had slow mail that it would keep running out of postage, so I finally put a forever stamp on it, and that's why he got it. So we're getting a little bit of an echo from you, but how was your?
There we go.
How was your?
Short and sweet. I'm still in the process of changing every aspect of my life. So Christmas was a welcome holiday, and there wasn't much pomp and circumstance on my end. It was really a chance to be with family, and that was about it.
We know what's coming, so.
Yeah.
I think you need that.
Exactly. Yeah, next Christmas will be amazing.
Expensive, and then they go up in price for years. Next year you can get away with it.
Pretty much.
You can get away with it. They'll just gurgle away and give them a bottle of milk, happy. But the year after, oof, you're going to have to paint that beard. You're going to have to paint that beard white.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what's everyone?
Well, Mark, since I'm, I was going to say real quick, since I'm getting married, we were joking before you came on to the beginning of the show that now that my Christmas tree, now that I'm getting married, I'm moving into a house that already has 2 Christmas trees. I've been told I either need to get rid of my Christmas tree or it becomes the Star Wars tree. So if you want an extra one, you can just let me know. Dom offered to send me his, but getting it across the pond would be a little painful, I think.
As I said in the warm-up, what we'll do is we'll get Aaron to fake a returns label to you, and I'll return it unwanted, an entire Christmas tree.
So before we move on to our guests, let me ask you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to get away with.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just continuing on the tree theme. I was going to say I don't think I'll be able to get away with an artificial tree anymore. So you can have mine as well, and that could be the Star Wars tree. It's a silver tinsel tree. It'll be perfect for Life Day, right?
My grandparents had one of those, and I have been trying to talk Michelle into the idea of that, and I've not been successful. So let me talk to her first, and then we'll see. I want to mention something on it.
Okay, you let me know.
about Amazon real quick before we move on to our guests. So Dom, you're talking about the Prime return label. I received a package from Amazon the other day. It was in their blue bubble wrap, which is for their smaller units or smaller things they ship. I picked it up and it was incredibly light, and I couldn't figure out why. It turns out there was nothing in the sealed package at all. I was supposed to be receiving a dongle for a computer. So I sent a return request. They gave me the option of putting it in an Amazon locker. I put it in an Amazon locker, but of course they told me I had to open it and put the return label in the package. So what I ended up doing is taking another Amazon box, putting the return label in there, writing on it. The package is still unopened. It's empty. And it's now been in process for the last 2.5 weeks because Amazon keeps telling me they haven't received the product that I ordered from them, when indeed they've received the empty, still sealed package.
This is,
And
I think, this sounds like Amazon trying to compete with Apple. With Apple, you know, you've got AirPods, Apple Mac Air. You've got, you know, they're just literally sending you Air now. The Amazon.
Yeah, it was pretty expensive air to ship to me, and especially, you know, I'm not really crazy about smog-filled city air. I'd like country air if they're going to send it to me.
One bag full of air. Fantastic.
Anyway, it reminds me a bit of Douglas Adams', not The Hitchhiker's Guide, but his Dirk Gently Detective Agency, where there was this snafu that they couldn't figure out, and they ultimately ended up cutting a living room sofa in half. Maybe we'll just have to open the bag and see what happens from here. So anyway, on that happy note, Lexie, how was your Christmas? And introduce yourself actually while we go through this part.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Lexie Knauer, formerly Lexie Pike. So my holiday was awesome. We did our first joint Christmas with both of our families.
Yeah,
that was really fun. Now that I'm Lexie Knauer. Yay. And I am a product marketer at Brightcove. And Brightcove is, hopefully you're all familiar, but they're an online video platform. We do everything from encoding all the way to app development and distribution.
Now, do I understand that Limelight and Brightcove are both in the same office complex now?
Yes, in Scottsdale. So Brightcove headquarters is in Boston, and I'm in the Scottsdale office. It's really fun to have our partners Limelight in the same building.
That's really funny because
the area in Scottsdale yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, is that the high tech area? Did I hear that the reason they moved there because there are a bunch of tech companies in that area?
Yeah, actually, our building's awesome. The Scottsdale office is beautiful. It's called SkySong, and it's actually a couple of the local university, Arizona State. They have a bunch of buildings over there, and so it's kind of a theater for the school. But it's fun. There's a bunch of tech companies in there, MindBody's in there, Weeple, Booker. It's a fun spot.
Cool.
A lot of good tech energy. Our little baby Silicon Valley.
Nice. Mark Myslinski, how have your holidays been, and where are you these days?
Where am I? I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been down here since 2006 and having fun. It was a joyous season and always a time for the gratitude for the year before and expectations for the year ahead. So I always like the season because it's time to take account. So I'm in Atlanta. I just started a job at Cinemedia, which is a private equity company, and it's all those companies that Cisco bought 10 years ago thinking they needed to get in the video business, and then they decided they don't need to do that, and they shedded those companies. So a collection of assets from Scientific Atlanta, from Barco, from Inlet, from Arroyo, were all put together, and it's kind of cool. It's like a startup company, kind of. But at the same time, we've got extensive footprint in the U.S. and also globally, as well as about $600 million in revenue. So it's a very interesting situation, deep, rich culture of good engineering resources and legacy products. So very excited to be here.
And was the choice to put it in Atlanta because Scientific Atlanta was just sort of so dominant in the video portfolio as opposed to putting it out in Silicon Valley?
Well, it's a lot of different places right now. I'm trying to think if we have offices on the West Coast, but I'm actually in the old Scientific Atlanta complex, and my commute's a whole 7 minutes, which is not bad at all. And so this is where Cisco had Scientific Atlanta housed, and some assets that they sold off to Technicolor. They're also in the same complex, but across the way. And so this just happens to be one office of many they have. I think the headquarters is formally in the UK. We also got extensive resources in Kortrijk, Belgium, of which I was just there the week before last. And so it's a very interesting place right now, but there's a lot going on. It's, we're having to fill in a lot of voids that happened when they moved these companies out of Cisco, which was, of course, well vetted with everything you need to run a company. And then all these voids showed up when they moved it over to a private equity firm. And so there's still some rebuilding going on. But like I said, it feels like a startup. And I kind of like that because it's more than just traditional building product and selling product. It feels like building a company again. So it's very interesting.
Nice. Very good.
Could only be 2020s that a 600 million, 4,000 person company could be described in any way as a startup. It's just
I hear you, but we have the luxury of startup in making some new products, and the way the industry is, right? It's just very opportunistic right now, and we're in a good position to go after it.
Nice. Okay, speaking of the industry, one of the topics that got posted on the Flipboard made a bit of noise at the end of last year was Twitch is being sued for $3 billion. Twitch obviously was a company that Amazon acquired for over $1 billion a couple of years ago. Dom or Mark East, especially since it seems like Twitch is sort of an esports focused company. What's the deal here? Why are we seeing this?
So what's happened is a group called the Rambler Group had exclusive distribution rights in Russia for Premiership games, and some people were illegally restreaming the football games on Twitch, which was essentially a leak in the exclusivity of the rights in Russia. And so the Rambler Group are suing Twitch for $3 billion. Which I'm surprised it hasn't made more news, because that's such a, I was going to possibly flippantly use the word frivolous. I think that's a bit of a frivolous claim, to be honest. Nobody loses $3 billion through watching a football game, because if they did, then 52 times a year, somebody would be making $3 billion. So that's completely insane. But hey, where does reality come when it comes to a courtroom these days? I have no idea. But I think it's an interesting test case, if nothing else. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think this is frivolous, or do you think this is just somebody slamming down the law?
I think it's interesting that.
Do you feel like Twitch, that's why it's maybe not getting so much coverage? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lexie.
Yeah. It's okay. I think you have a bit of I was just going to say, I agree. I think that's why it's not getting so much coverage. Obviously, Twitch is the biggest fish to go after, but I think it's interesting the onus is on them. I know at Bright Cove, we spend a lot of effort and resources in making sure that things don't get streamed to Reddit or Twitch or streaming platforms like that through token authentication and other DRM focused matters. But yeah, I don't think Twitch should be on.
No, I mean, the evidence given in the article is just crazy. They're talking about 36,000. They provided screenshots that were evidence that 36,000 viewers watched the game. So, screenshots. They screenshot a lot of games there, and they I mean, to actually have screenshots, I'm guessing that they were themselves the pirates. So that seems a bit challenging to me. And how 30? I mean, I can't do the maths in my head, but it looks like it's about £1 million a viewer there, which is really rather an expensive subscription for anyone. I mean, I don't pay for any football, never would, but I certainly wouldn't pay £1 million a game. That's crazy.
This is what's striking fear in the big guns, right? Whether you're a Disney or Netflix or otherwise. And I know for the markets that I'm tending to, which include the big direct-to-consumer companies that we all don't want to talk about right now, as well as the major broadcasters and what they're going to be doing with ATSC 3.0. But DRM, if not the first set of questions from them, is the second set of questions from them. They just absolutely positively need to see a solid DRM strategy and something that meets the strength that they're requiring before they'll go much further in the conversations.
It's going to be even more complicated though, because around beginning of December, Russia was Runet was doing tests of disconnecting Russia's access to the DNS, the traditional IANA-run DNS networks. And oh, there we go. Ian Knox just popped in the chat room. Hi, Ian. Happy New Year. Popped in the chat room and highlighted that BT are paying £6.3 million per game, but that's not per viewer. So that's really expensive if it's per viewer. But you know, if Runet are going to obfuscate what they're doing with their DNS mapping, that's going to make any geo-blocking and DRM mapping within Russia even more complicated. So I just don't know where this is going to go. Really, I think I think it's almost leaps into the next subject that we were going to talk about, which is the more general issue of the resurgence of piracy. And I think what I feel is happening is that the music industry is a good bellwether, and that happened between 2000 and 2010, the first decade. We saw a bunch of companies try to create walled garden online music services. When DRM first appeared, Warner went off and got itself a DRM license. They couldn't really run them. People felt they'd bought music, but actually discovered they'd licensed it, and there was a whole war there. So everyone got angry and went over to LimeWire and BitTorrent and so on. And that then was only resolved when iTunes and Spotify emerged and went affordable music, easy to access. Let's just make this. Let's just go. Let's just make this easy. And in the same way, 10 years, a decade later, Netflix really solved the online streaming video thing and got content going, and piracy dropped to a minimum in 2014, 2015. And then as the competition's resurging and everyone's trying to wall their gardens up and cut away from everyone and get these sort of exclusive content deals, we're seeing more and more discussion about the resurgence of piracy. So, piracy and competitive markets are kind of they're a bit of a complement to each other, really, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Lexie, and then I just had a quick comment on that.
I was going to say, I really appreciate the audio analogy. I think Spotify was very clever in offering an ad-supported model, made it more accessible, and something like traditional radio, where it's free to everyone with the cost of advertisement. And I think we're going to see a lot more AVOD services pop up in a response to piracy resurgence. The only problem is it's the long-form content, like long movies, that I don't think the ad tolerance is really there. So I think that's where we'll continue to see piracy, and we'll have to maybe solve for it in a different way, maybe sponsored content, native advertising, something like that.
Yeah, something needs to be done, I think. Sorry, Tim, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the things that's interesting when you talk about the music analogy is, I look back at Windows Media Audio, where they chose to turn their DRM licenses off. And there was this huge outcry. They thought hardly anybody was using the service, but it turned out people were returning to the same content. So they ultimately had to show consumers how to burn the audio to CDs and then re-rip it into something like iTunes, which, first of all, I thought was really ironic that they were doing that after they'd spent all that money on trying to keep piracy down. But the second thing, the piece to me that I think the music industry is now starting to follow the video industry is in this exclusivity model. So Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, will have content exclusive for 7 to 10 days on their service. We don't see the same kind of piracy happening there, though. It doesn't seem like people say, I'm going to absolutely figure out how to pirate, to listen to this album in the first 7 to 10 days. It seems like they're content to wait for that exclusive content to hit their their audio streaming service. I guess my question is, in video streaming services, the exclusivity tends to be around original content. And Mark Myslinski, you had a thought about that before we went on the air, and I'd be interested to sort of hear everybody's take on whether it's the fact that it's exclusive original content that's never going to go to the other streaming services that pushes up the piracy, or if there's a model eventually down the line that after Amazon's had an Amazon original for 3 years, they'll make it available to Netflix, they'll make it available to Disney, etc.
That's a curious question. I can't quite remember the comment that I had before, but it's definitely the battle of original content that's going on now. And I know with the things that at least we're looking at where I'm working now, fingerprinting's starting to get defeated, and so we're definitely moving into a watermarking kind of world, and watermarking can be very, very effective. And with proper return channels, you can not only tell that something's being pirated, but you can go right to the source of where it's being pirated from. But I don't know. I personally think that original content's going to stay tight to the vest with at least all the big guns for now, to make their mark in terms of getting the viewers to come over and getting the viewers to stay, not just in season for one or two originals that they like to watch, but stay as subscribers constantly throughout the year. But there's going to be a whole nother niche, I think, not niche, but segment to the industry other than the big guys, the Disney and Hulu and ESPN and all that. But I think there's going to be a bunch of original content that's going to be based on geography, that's going to be based on ethnicity, even based on what particular demographics' consumption patterns are, whether they're more or less lean into their content with their mobile or otherwise, or more or less lean back. And I'll bet you a nickel they don't push defeating or fighting privacy as hard in those, because they want to get their content out there. They want to get identified as sources of those content. And just like I think our industry is a little bit lax at the tier 1 level for a little while for the same reasons, now they're tightening up. I think that second level content is going to run into the same thing where they might not be as tight on the piracy at first, and until they get their names out there. May have changed subjects on you there a little bit.
No, that's good. Mid-season churn was one of the things I think you had mentioned earlier. That was sort of the original content question.
Yeah, that's a real factor now. Just for what I had said earlier, that people watch a certain streaming service because their favorite originals in season, and then that's out of season, and they tend to remember, oh yeah, then I have this other thing that I like a lot over on. Maybe they're switching from Disney to Prime because they have something else that's in season that's one of their favorites. And so over the course of a year, they might switch streaming services 3 or 4 times depending on what's in season, and the streaming services are going to have to put up with that, and they're going to have to put up with that. And one of the things is not make it hard for people to disengage, just like they make it not hard to re-engage. You're just going to have to live with that, because if you make it a pain in the butt to leave your service, then that becomes part of the quality of what people experience. They're going to go to other services and make it easy enough to disengage as it is to engage.
Fair point.
And I think if I could make a point, I think the ease of consumption is what's driving the piracy. So to the earlier point about Netflix, reducing the overall level of piracy in the 2014, 2015 timeframe when SVOD really became a big thing, it's because Netflix was it. And then, Prime came and Hulu was in there somewhere. And now we've got CBS All Access and Disney Plus and all these other, SVOD properties, and people want to watch these shows, but do they want 8 different, SVOD subscriptions that they have to manage, over the course of a month? And then you've got the churn factor, as you mentioned. If I'm only watching The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, and then that season ends, well, why am I paying for Disney Plus anymore? So I'm going to bail on that and maybe fire up CBS All Access so I can watch the next season of Star Trek. So I think in some cases you've got people turning to, and this is another piece in the flip book, the I Stream It All and Jetflix, these guys who just got busted by the feds, to consume their content, their original content, or they're going straight to BitTorrent and using something like that. So yeah, I think that's what's driving it.
Yeah, it's amazing that I was just having a look at that that particular article, and hopefully you can see it on my camera at the moment. Don't know why it's quite so yellow, but we'll worry about that another time. But yeah, there was 10,000 movies, 118,000 television episodes, and it was all
I actually like
monthly fee.
I like the one to the right there. Scientists want to spray shit into the atmosphere, I think is what the video said.
There we go. Just
Sorry.
see that, bro.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Back to the topic at hand. Yeah.
Am I in the wrong forum?
No, but this is
No.
But I think it's
just Tom, to your point.
It's that type of infrastructure. What that article, when I first saw that, what it's sort of really highlighted to me was however much we sit there and ooh and ah at Disney Plus and at Netflix and all these technology platforms being rolled out, two guys in a bedroom are competing with them. So that worries me as a technical vendor into this sector.
Is competing the right word?
Well, not legally competing, but how much of this is into the law and compliance, and how much is into actually technically being able to deliver a service. And if these guys are being, the headline of that article was the feds break up an illegal service that dwarfs Netflix and the Hulu libraries. I mean, we don't know what their consumption and their audience was like. I acknowledge, but at the same time, the fact that these guys are threatening them, concerning them enough. Two guys in a bedroom and a server. Yeah, how much do we need CDNs with hundreds of thousands of servers and huge amounts of bandwidth and telco networks? And when a couple of guys in a bedroom can do this?
Well, I don't know if it was in a bedroom, and I don't know if it was a server. Like, it doesn't really go into what their infrastructure was. I think it was probably quite a bit larger than that. The thing that strikes me though is the willful ignorance and willful negligence on their part and on the part of the viewers who were subscribing to their service, who were, it was probably pretty obvious to everyone that this was not on the up and up, and yet they had how many subscribers? It mentions it here in the article. It was 100,000 something, right?
Yeah, certainly.
It was a bunch of subscribers.
200,000. Oh no.
Right. Yeah, all of whom thought the names iStreamItAll and Jetflix were akin to Hulu and Netflix, and it seems
employer mark.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a survey of those viewers. Were you aware that this was illegal? No, come on, be honest. Were you aware that this was illegal? It'd be interesting to know that. And then
here's what's funny about it from a keyboard standpoint. If you're typing along, J and N are right next to each other. You're like, oh, I accidentally hit Jetflix instead of Netflix. It was a really good deal.
Tim, were you a subscriber?
I have no.
Be honest.
Tim was about to say he's never subscribed to anything. I'm slightly worried about that now.
Honest, the J's right next to the N. Come on.
I was going to say, to be fair, those operations are pretty big, and they look sophisticated. So, I mean, I think people are ignorantly pirating content. You get to those sites, it looks legit, pretty standard content. And I think young kids and grandparents aren't going to know when they're pirating content. I mean, I think the level of sophistication is really what causes the issue. Like you said, there's 200,000 subscribers.
Yeah, but I don't think any of the subscribers are young kids and grandparents. I think they're all savvy enough to become aware of something like iStreamItAll and Jetflix, and they're savvy enough to go through the machinations of subscribing. They're probably savvy enough to know that it's not real, that it's not legal. And then you've got these two guys who got busted for both of those services. They were working for both of those services, and clearly they're savvy enough to create these platforms and manage them and that sort of thing. So obviously, there was a decision made at some point on the part of both these guys to, go forward with something that inevitably would end in a huge federal copyright case. And they were fine with that. I have to wonder what goes through the minds of these, of these guys who could go work for any startup, and they choose this road. It's mind-boggling.
Well, that's a curious one.
Probably doesn't get as far as that, but at the bottom, the bail was paid by Mark's company. They're now working for you.
That's funny.
And the camera conveniently switches to Mark.
I was just going to say, in defense of what Lexie said, I mean, we're in this period where content was being shown by Netflix and now has been pulled back and being shown by other SVODs and being pulled back. So the consumer can be easily confused that, oh, this must be available on multiple platforms. Or, they have no idea what a lot of what we're talking about here on this forum, and all they know is it's been available on Netflix. Now it's available back on NBC or whatever, and so they may just be thinking, well, that just happens to be another outlet that's available for this content.
I remember Akamai actually doing a study. It's probably 7-8 years ago. It was either CES or NAB. They had a bunch of reporters come in, and they talked to us about piracy. And one of the points that they made was people will try to find it legitimately, but if it's not, and this was back in the era when Hulu would do things like House, the TV show about the doctor. They wouldn't release it until 8 days later. So it would air on TV and then they would release it 8 days later. And Akamai's point was people will give it about 48 hours, and if they can't find it, and if it's going to keep them out of the water cooler conversation at work, they will go find that content and look at it. And now when we've got exclusive content on these on-demand services, if you don't want to pay the $10 a month, but you have a way to watch a couple episodes so you feel like you're in the know. Like, I didn't know anything about Baby Yoda until Christmas. And then I got told that it wasn't even Baby Yoda, it was the child. And, so I'm completely clueless on this because, Dom, as you say, I don't subscribe to anything. But at the end of the day, people who would want to know that, if they aren't going to get Disney Plus, they're going to figure out some way to get the content and see it. So I think part of it's ignorance. Part of the conversation.
We all have our witnesses. I didn't know anything about Instagram until 2 days ago, and then my daughter had a rather ageist conversation with me. So I'm now on Instagram.
Okay, boomer.
So, we miss things, yeah.
All right. Anyway, that leads into another topic we were going to talk about when we're talking about two guys in a bedroom or whatever that scenario is. I think we say that because that's how Mark Cuban got started, with broadcast.com. But Mark Myslinski, you mentioned low latency actually making it easier for people to serve content rather than just being part of a big CDN. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the state of low latency at this point.
Well, I'm just thinking about, we're now having companies want to go to direct to consumer, and just the whole competition for eyeballs. And I mean, what we've had for some time is that the cost to go over the top has always been its own cost, because you had a separate workflow from what's been traditional cable and pay TV. So that was slowing the deployment of direct-to-consumer services and streaming services in general. And what would be ideal is if you could use the same two workflows to deliver both your traditional pay TV as well as your OTT. And what's been holding back the idea, let's say, using the same infrastructure as, well, let me back up for a second. So, and what's been used for over the top, that infrastructure is extremely opportunistic. It works in a domain called the HTTP domain, and it's extremely efficient then for targeted delivery, whether that be for targeted advertising, personalized content, blackouts, and just rights management in general. It's highly efficient, but the problem is it's always had a delay associated with it. And, whether it be 20, 30, 40 milliseconds of delay, it's reading, it was at a threshold where people, especially watching live events and watching live sports, didn't want to put up with that kind of delay. But now we've hit this inflection point where at least the people leading in the industry, they can do this over the top infrastructure with all the conveniences of target delivery they can do it with the same amount of delay as broadcast television, down around 6 milliseconds. So now this opens up the idea of a unified infrastructure available for both over-the-top and pay TV. So that's accelerating the number of players that are getting in the over-the-top streaming industry and the direct-to-consumer industry, as well as it is going to accelerate the ability to do targeted delivery, like I said, whether it be personalized content of which you can make it more particular to any one consumer that's watching it, whether it be targeted advertising of which can get higher CPMs because you know a lot more about the demographics of the people that are out there, or necessary rights management. So, we're hitting this inflection point where that's also accelerating just direct to consumer and personalization in general, not just for the big guys.
How about you, Lexie?
Yeah.
Are you getting a big pull for low latency?
I couldn't. Low latency, yes and no, but really being able to translate those broadcast workflows into digital and converge the two to make it easier to get direct to consumer. We've spent a lot of time and effort to read things like SCUDdy markers rather than having to do digital cue points, and being able to ingest TS versus RTMP and being able to do those conversions to make it easier for broadcasters to go direct to consumer. But in terms of low latency and targeted advertising, we're gearing up for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, and scale and being able to target to that large of an audience. These are things that you have to take under consideration. So we've looked at things like doing cohorts, so being smarter about how we handle that amount of traffic and target that many users at once. But then you run into things like latency. So if you're using multiple data centers, using multiple targeting methods, it becomes challenging. So that's going to be top of mind for us this year as we gear up for the summer.
Mark, Tim, any other thoughts on latency from your points of view?
Me or Lexie?
No,
Mark East.
Which Mark?
When are we going to give me a nickname?
The East from the West.
So I just add to that. I mean, SCUDdy 35 is a very powerful thing, and you can certainly do ad insertion, and it could support targeted ad insertion, but it has certain amounts of overhead. It also has issues with pushing it through, especially OTT distribution pipes. It can get minced up. It can get altered. It can there's problems with consistency of those markers and the use of them all the way through the OTT distribution streams. But if you go right to over the top and use manifest manipulation, it's highly efficient then for doing ad insertion, for doing personalized television, and you don't have to overcome some of the challenges associated with SCT 35. So it just opens up a whole new world of efficiently being able to personalize television and advertising.
Yeah, we're really focused on exactly. SCUDdy can get a little bit complicated, but being able to intelligently configure a pod, make sure there's no discontinuities, and making sure that all the timing works out. It's really hard, especially in a live environment. But yeah, manifest manipulation definitely helps.
Marky, what's your take? I mean, latency is something obviously that impacts esports and some of the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the new standard. I think low latency is the new standard. ULL has not quite reached an inflection point where that has become what everyone's clamoring for. But if you can get within the 2 to 5 second range, that's akin to broadcast television, I think that's where you need to be right now. And I'm pretty sure all live broadcasters agree on that point. And that's perfectly. We're perfectly capable of doing that with vanilla HLS, as was discussed at Streaming Media West. I don't know if we need low latency HLS right now for most endeavors, but.
one. Well, there we go. We're back in. My apologies for that. I have no idea what happened. Sorry, Mark, you were going to say something there. We'll call that technology problems.
Where'd you lose me?
You were talking about the less need for ultra low latency versus low latency. That the standard 2.5 seconds is.
Yeah,
the
question.
HLS, low latency.
Yeah, the question was about low latency, and I think it's table stakes at this point. We've been talking about it for a couple years, and now it's to the point where all the CDNs have some sort of solution. Where I'm able to get anywhere from 2 to 7 seconds on regular old vanilla Akamai HLS, and that works for me. So and it works for all of our customers at this point. I literally have no customers who are asking for anything lower than 2 seconds. So when that becomes the topic of conversation, then we'll address it at that point. And there are certainly emerging technologies that address that need. But
so Dom, I think Mark Myslinski mentioned, we're doing HTTP. We're doing it really well now for low latency. You have, for the last 20 years, advocated for multicast and some of the reliable UDPs. Do you think we're at the point where it's time to say HTTP is the way we're going to deliver and not try to continue to advance latencies that would be sub 1 second? Or what's your sort of take on that from the industry?
No, I'm very much of the opinion that so you have to excuse me. I'll sort my camera out when I'm next off shot. My camera's playing up a little bit here, but since that reboot. But I'm very much of the opinion that the resurgence of interest in IP multicast in the last sort of 6 months, because off the back of ATSC3 and the 5G rollouts, will bring back, and also the re-emergence of edge compute. There's going to be less and less need for standardization. People are very obsessed with HLS and the derivatives of that to reach specific devices because CDNs needed a commodity of scale. But what's happening now is CDNs are learning how to roll out proper fog architecture across their networks. And so if you want to have go back to RTSP running on real servers distributed in 16 nodes all over the country and have half-second latency with whatever input you want, that's something that you can roll specifically for your platform at will and roll at any scale. And that's something that's coming back with cloud computing. So while there is there will always be an attempt to create this sort of one ring to rule them all, the one standard to bind them. We're moving further and further away from that than ever now, with edge computing and distributed computing taking shape the way it is. The only reason that it might be relevant is in low power devices where you're trying to restrict things to a specific rollout on a specific chipset in a phone. But to be honest, my phone's more powerful than my laptop these days, so that itself is changing, and the phone itself is becoming an edge. That's relaying data out to your watch. That's relaying data out to other devices. So, no, I think the whole HTTP thing has been an aberration, a little bit like vinyl was, and in the sort of 70s. I think it's distracted people into a sort of little bit of a myopic way of looking at content delivery. People still believe that vinyl was in some way helping artists. Helping people reach audiences, but it wasn't. It was like a choke point. It was a very restrictive thing. It was a necessity because of the cost of building that type of infrastructure. And in the same way, Akamai was very efficient for them to strip away Flash and strip away Windows Media and not have several different teams running all these different protocols in their networks because it was expensive. But ask Amazon if they'd like everybody to do one thing. And cut all their different millions. Amazon launches 16 different stupidly named services every day, and trying to convince Amazon to cut back what they're doing to one thing, and say you're only going to do low latency HLS. It's just totally not going to be the way forward. And I think the CDNs are going to open out and start looking like very distributed edge compute networks over the next couple of years. Some of them are totally myopic about HTTP. But I think those guys are going to have to correct course at some point in the next 18 months, 2 years. So There you go.
So
That was the strongly opinionated corner of the day.
So that's going to blur the lines then between distribution, which could now just be over the commercial clouds, versus distribution over the major CDN players. It's going to be how they handle the edge compute and the efficiency of the distribution of it and the use of it that's going to make the difference. Do you think?
Yeah. There's no. I mean, the CDNs were the first clouds, for sure. And then the clouds decided to centralize operations, and that meant that they could have more concentration of skill and they could create a greater diversity of propositions. So they then sort of went down a schism that they called public cloud. But the CDNs have 2 decades more experience in running very, very distributed elastic compute environments. The thing is, they have never made that elastic compute capability available to third parties. They've always offered specific platform as a service offerings through that, so because of the economy of scale and maintaining it. So for Akamai, it was just much easier to run Varnish or whatever it was, Nginx everywhere, to do HTTP forwarding. So, oh dear, look at all these other inferior technologies, we'll just break them and let them go away. But then all those people move to public cloud, their businesses are scaling, they need to get to reach. So the CDNs that can offer proper edge compute and let people run any function as a service in the cloud deep at the edge for those niche use cases, they're going to get the business, and that's where the growth will be. So yeah, we are going to see quite a lot. I'm pushing edge compute and CDN convergence or schism, whichever way you want to look at the timeline. I'm pushing that in the Content Delivery Summit this May really hard. There is an absolutely clear schism between Fastly, Akamai, Cloudflare, and on the other side, Stackpath and Limelight, and where they're going with their edge compute strategies, and they're divergent. They'll always offer a complementary set of everything because they don't want to turn away customers. But the strength of belief in the future of HTTP is myopic in my mind in the big guns, and there's a big opportunity for the smaller players or the upstart players, the disruptive players at the moment.
Yeah, actually, Dom, I for once actually sort of agree with you on that. I do think edge compute is going to be a defining line between what's been traditional CDNs and cloud computing. But do I hear you say that if somebody wanted to stand up older technologies or different technologies and set up their own nodes for distribution using edge compute, that would be the kind of thing that the CDN would essentially allow? Or will there be a point for edge compute where they'll say, no, you can't?
No,
you can't.
I absolutely think edge compute will go fully elastic. I absolutely think I'll be able to walk in to a Limelight, a Stackpath, a company like that in 2025 and roll out a Windows Media CDN. I'll pay by the hour for the computes that I use, and it'll be deeply located. It'll probably be maybe even in the enterprise network. At the moment today, Ideas, my company, we're probably one of the largest Windows Media distributors in the world because we do all the financial news for all our financial clients, and that's a shed load of financial announcements. And they still use Windows Media Multicast in many, many enterprise networks around the world. And we spin all the Windows Media origins up in EC2. And if the clients haven't got them, we have to sit down and help them set up old Windows boxes which support Windows Media Multicast in the enterprise networks, and that's complex. That's complex enough for them. But at the moment, one of the CDNs can say, "Oh yeah, extend our edge compute into your enterprise." And when Don wants to spin up a Windows Media server, he can do it for you. Well, what's not to like? And that's the way that that's the way fog is going. That's the way the high end of edge computing is going.
So it's an interesting combination of eCDN and CDN as well as elastic computing as well.
It's EC2 inside out. Amazon won't be able to do that. They won't be able to sit out at the edge of all the telcos because the telcos themselves don't want to give that much power to Amazon. So they're leaving them in the data centers and dragging the access back to the data centers. But for those niche applications, particularly in car entertainment, autonomous driving, all the drivers that are behind 5G, that's where edge compute's going. And CDNs are just orders of magnitude more used to dealing with network issues than Amazon is.
That's a good segue to a question then for our guests about 5G. Is it something you're hearing about, you have customers wanting to do, or it's just the buzzword of the day at the moment?
Mark, do you? For me, I'd say it falls in the buzzword category. I think it will maybe have some implications for production that could be good in the future. But from our perspective, maybe some help in some lower bandwidth areas or regions, but nothing huge, nothing massive. It hasn't been on the top of our mind.
So contribution side from a production standpoint, possibly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mark,
for sure. Yeah, it's a first mile thing, not a last mile thing for us, and the networks just aren't there yet, especially in the U.S. at this point. So it's buzzword for now.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about it legitimately soon, but not right now.
Well,
yeah, I think 5G's got a number of different challenges. We've got masts being upgraded in our area for 5G, and the community's polarized about it. There's people that think that it's going to make a difference to the speed with which they can surf the web, which is just obviously, if you're a techie, speed of light is the speed of light, guys. It's just, that's the way it is.
Right. Exactly.
And there's video companies which are saying this is going to be a great panacea because you're going to be able to watch 8K on a 1-inch screen, and that's completely pointless. I don't want to watch 8K on a 52-foot screen. It's just, I'm not sold on 8K at all. But there are places where without 5G it's going to be impossible. Autonomous driving is the big driver for 5G. Smart motorways, that's the one. I actually haven't found anything else that justifies it yet. They'd do much better if they invested in ubiquity on 4G. I'm a big believer in that. There's a lot of communities who haven't got any connectivity at all. Why you need to go and add 5 times the power consumption, 5 times the mast density in cities to give people who've already got more than enough bandwidth, more than enough bandwidth, I don't know. So,
Mark Myslinski, you were going to say something?
Well, I just, what Dom said is interesting that, they already have gobs of bandwidth in the city. And then if you go to the sparsely populated areas, 5G, it's my understanding you're putting towers every 300 feet.
Yeah.
They're just, so at some point that's going to be impractical for certain things. I also find it interesting that, 5G's gobs of bandwidth, that's great. 5G can datacast, which is a good thing, and especially for Internet of Things is going to come into play. But at the same time, I'm working the side of the things with ATSC 3.0 and broadcasting, and ATSC 3.0 in terms of data casting is going to be able to outduel, I think, everything, including 5G for certain IoT models. For the cost per bit to data cast out with ATSC 3.0 is going to be more effective than even 5G. So I think 5G is going to have its place, and but it might not be the wide panacea that everybody thinks it's going to be. It's just my opinion at the moment.
I was going to say, I'll add on ATSC 3.0 that I believe that that's actually got the potential to be a game changer. I wrote an article at the beginning of 2019 talking about sort of the ramp up to ATSC 3.0. And one of the things that I find interesting when you go back and look at ATSC 1.0 is that, as the local broadcasters were given this particular amount of bandwidth and megabits per second, they turned around and actually would slice it into 3 to 4 720p channels as opposed to 1 1080p. I think if that model continues, some of the local broadcasters may begin to be able to offer on-demand content as well.
Yeah.
Because if you've got that part of the data pipe available to you, and you locally at your tower or close to your tower store that content, there's no reason to say that there couldn't be. Now, it may be like the early days of cable video on demand where, we're going to play it at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. But I also think there's a model they could go to full on-demand delivery to consumers. And what does that do in terms of those affiliates of NBC or CBS being able to offer all access or Peacock as a service as well across the tower.
Yeah, or even as downloadable content. But before we let go of the 5G thing, where it could get interesting is when you have 5G that you need to get out to populated areas and there's sparse use of it in between. ATSC 3.0 could end up being a backbone service to 5G to get out to those other areas, and they could work together. And it could be that combination of ATSC 3.0 and 5G that could be something really special, maybe.
Interesting. So we've got a couple minutes here because we were delayed in the middle. We'll probably run over about 5 minutes extra, but let's talk about sort of what we're going to see in 2020. Lexie, I'll go ahead and let you go first on that. First of all, are you going to CES? And then secondly, what do you expect to see in the 2020 timeframe?
So I will not be at CES, but a couple of my colleagues will. So Brightcove will definitely have a presence, and people can go meet up with them if they so choose. But my 2020 predictions they're not necessarily novel or new, but I do believe that we're going to start going back to normal traditional TV, just streamed. I think we will see more skinny bundles. I think it's already started to happen with Disney. When you look at their bundling ESPN and Hulu and their acquisition of Fox, it's just all going to kind of be what we have in cable. I also think, like we mentioned with piracy, to reduce with the things like we talked about, subscription fatigue, piracy, I think we're going to really start to see an influx in ad-supported models. How that translates to long form, like movies and films, that'll be interesting. Maybe something more native, or things with interactivity, being able to do in-app purchasing. But I think we'll see skinny bundles and AVOD. Those are my two big predictions for 2020.
Okay. Yeah. TV, like the way it was in the 90s, is just sort of a scary thing for the 2020s. Yeah. Mark Myslinski, what about you? What CES, and then also what are your takes for 2020?
Well, I'm not going to CES, which doesn't bug me at all because that show's kind of big and ornery. It's hard to get things done there. I will be at NAB, of course. But first, I'll repeat the one thing that I said. I think the trajectories of the people subscribership in direct-to-consumer and also pay TV decline, those trajectories are going to go non-linear and move much faster. So I think it's going to be an interesting year with some level of inflection point showing up there. Second of all, I would concur with Dom that we're going to see very blurred lines between CDNs and clouds, and it's going to be the management and deployment of edge compute that's going to maybe be the competitive factor for all that. And then thirdly, I've always been a proponent that linear is not going to die. And also a proponent that linear is very valuable, extremely valuable. And I think maybe the golden gauntlets there, which I'll mention in a minute. But, what we've seen is just a resurgence of SVOD, of binge watching, of the ability to address different demographics very effectively. So I really like that, and it's all valid. But linear hasn't gone away. I think it's just getting repackaged. I think especially with the the coming of connected TVs, and with that we're going to have linear is going to make a resurgence, maybe for reality TV and sports. But linear addressable advertising, I see as a big golden goblet. That you can have the size of broadcast audiences, yet when it comes time for advertising, have linear addressable going on there, and I think that could be, really push along the idea of targeted advertising and the promise of the revenues that can make.
Well, I definitely agree that targeted advertising is going to continue to evolve. It'll be interesting to see how that plays with linear, like you said. Mm-hmm. Marquise, what about you?
Well, first of all, I need to say I really like the cinema verite look you've got going on, Tim. I like the handheld Blair Witch Project sort of thing.
Sorry, I realized I didn't have the long extension cord for my power adapter, so I'm having to hold it on my knee.
No. No worries. I'm serious. I like it. I'm only going to CES to catch the Ivanka Trump keynote.
No, you're not. It's pantomime. It's pantomime
So,
season.
no, I probably won't be at CES. I think from the production side of things, I think in 2020, it'll just be a kind of a continuation of what happened in 2019, which is this migration on the contribution side away from satellite and towards bonded LTE solutions for a lot of different stuff, and the accompanying migration away from on-site production to REMI style production, a lot of which is being enabled with the bonded LTE and the IP enabled technologies over satellite. The Switch is doing a lot of fun stuff with that. LTN is doing a lot of fun stuff with that. So that side of my business is changing quite rapidly, and it's up to the legacy, satellite based companies like PSSI and those folks to kind of figure out how to keep pace and maintain their revenues. So it'll be an interesting year in that space.
Got it. And the headless Dominic Robinson,
Yeah,
which, by the way, Michelle, I asked you where your hat is.
I'm wearing it at the moment.
Because
Tell
you
her I'm
normally wear a hat.
When my camera went off, I put the hat on, and I haven't taken it off since. But yeah, the hat's somewhere upstairs. I don't know. Yeah, so a couple of adventurous predictions. So I think the battle between ESPN, DAZN, and Amazon is going to be quite interesting this year. I think there is still a play to be the Netflix of sport, and somebody's going to try to win that game this year, and then realise that actually, as soon as there's one, then there'll probably be a Sky Sports Plus will come in, and everyone will spend 35 conferences a year talking about whether Sky Sports Plus is going to take over from whoever won the. Anyway, I think that particular game is going to be the hot one. Amazon's obviously done its Premiership games over here on Prime, and they seem to be. What's interesting is there isn't any news about it, which probably means it's working quite well, and the fans are just engaged in the games rather than bitching about blurry images and so on. So I think the live linear sports packages will get their stuff together. The other one that I think is interesting, which goes back a little bit to the RUNET DNS trials, is as you know, I did certainly Tim and Mark know, I did a diploma in internet policy about 10 years ago and so on. So I still keep my finger on the internet policy space, and it's getting rough out there. There's some crazies in power in every government in the world, and there is still an attempt to bring the internet under the ITU's auspices, regulatory auspices, and move it away from the consensus-based environment that it's until now grown up under. The RUNET thing is a big warning salvo there, and if that happens, I think we're going to see significant balkanization, and probably quite quickly. And I think it'll be much harder for example, me to get access to content from the States, for people in Asia to get access to content. The internet will not look like the internet. It will go back to it will reveal itself to be what it probably is, which is a whole myriad of collections of networks. Which I think will change the game for the monopolies and the startups, and the way that small businesses have been able to become global players. I think it'll change competition. So I think we're going to see some of that starting to really strongly emerge over this year.
Ooh, well, balkanization's not a pretty word, but I actually sort of see your point there, Dom. Especially with RUNET and some of the things that have happened in the UN in the last couple of days, with China and Russia pushing this whole cybercrime thing, which essentially could be.
I think the internet,
as
as North Europeans and Americans have thought of it as a global thing, is going to become more and more restricted to territories, which is a shame. But it only helps the tax. It only helps the tax collectors at the end of the day.
Speaking of which, I want to mention one last thing before we go out. Apparently, France passed a law allowing their tax collectors to go onto social media and gather what they're calling anomalies, where if somebody says, I don't have a lot of money, but they're flashing wads of cash and standing next to fancy cars. I think that monitoring model, along with balkanization, is going to be something we're going to have to address here in the early 2020s.
Yeah, probably fine. It was always legal for them to do that. It's just that they're putting it into practice. It's like just like child pornography, and it's completely illegal. Doesn't need any regulation on the internet. It is just illegal in every country on the planet. It's enforcing it that's difficult, and trying to blame it on the internet is like trying to blame it on paper.
Well, we had companies over here in the U.S. that some of them were screening social media as part of making a decision to hire somebody.
Mm. But they did anyway. They just didn't admit it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that lovely topic as our ending topic,
All right. So.
we're signing off here for the next month. Apparently, I'm the only one going to CES, and I didn't even know Ivanka Trump was going to keynote. So, Mark, I may have to adjust my schedule as well. But
take good notes.
Or a rifle.
Exactly. Well, what's funny is I get all the press releases from CES, in my press email. I've seen nothing about that. Maybe they don't necessarily want to publish that one out because they know they'll get blowback or something. But anyway, with that,
strange end to the 2020 opener.
we'll be back with some, less heavy topics at the beginning
I'm DJing
of February.
If you want a bit of jungle mixed with pop tunes, don't forget a Thursday night show in a couple of hours. So.
Exactly. We'd like to thank our guests, Lexie and Mark, for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Dom and Mark East, as always, and we hope Eric gets to feeling a little better so he can get back to work and join us on the next episode as well.
Great. Thanks, guys.